guest is a man of conviction, experience, and deep Iowa roots. Senator Lynn Evans has spent his life serving the people of this state, first as an educator and school superintendent, and now as a principled voice in the Iowa Senate. With a long career in public education and a strong record of defending parental rights, educational integrity, and constitutional freedoms, he brings a thoughtful, grounded perspective to some of the biggest challenges facing our state. Most notably, he stood as one of the Dauntless Dozen, a group of 12 senators who refused to vote on the state budget until a key property rights bill was brought to the debate floor. That bill passed the Senate, but was later vetoed by Governor Reynolds, igniting a major debate within the Republican Party about the balance between economic development and individual liberty. We're grateful he joined us this morning at our Kairos Nexus meeting for a powerful exchange and dialogue, and even more honored to welcome him now to the podcast. So welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Oliver. I appreciate being here.
Yeah. We had a great conversation this morning.
I was really impressed with how engaged in that conversation they were.
Yeah, I learned a lot, actually.
Yeah, it was fun.
It was interesting having former Representative Rob Taylor there, and then Governor candidate Eddie Andrews as well. So, and the business owners that come to those meetings, they're very, they care about the state, they care about our communities and their industries, and for them to be able to sit down with you guys and really have that dialogue is so important.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, definitely.
Very good.
So you've spent your entire adult life serving Iowa, first as an educator and legislator. Can you take us back to your roots in Aurelia and walk us through how your upbringing and time in education leadership shaped your values and your approach to public service?
Sure. I grew up in Aurelia, Iowa, which is in northwest Iowa. If anyone's familiar with the geography of the state, I live right between Cherokee and Storm Lake, about 45 minutes south of the Iowa Great Lakes. Town of roughly 1,000 people, graduating class of 42. Took a little lap around the state in my career as an educator, teacher and a coach, then a principal, and then the last 16 years as a school superintendent, and ended up right back in my hometown. Came back as an opportunity to bring two school districts together, first in a whole grade sharing opportunity, and then reorganized through a vote of the people, which passed by 80% on the first go around. Rarely does that happen. Two school districts that financially were upside down, and we had to right that ship first, and then merged our education philosophies and aligned our curriculums and prepared for the reorganization. It's been great. We still get a lot of good feedback about that reorganization. I'm from Aurelia. My wife is from Alta, and those are the two districts that merged. When we first came back, they said, we've tried this sharing between these districts before with athletics and even shared a few classes and teachers, and it never seemed to work. And I said, well, my wife and I have been married for almost 40 years. I think we can prove that it'll work if we just look at it in the right perspective. So
that's interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. And I felt like during our meeting this morning, I was getting kind of a prep for our interview when you talked about your background and kind of how much you really enjoyed being an educator and a superintendent, and then, your decision to leave that world and then come into politics. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. My decision to leave public education was I'd gotten to the point where you could see the shift to the left in our public school districts, and it's always incremental. It's never a big jump when there's a move like that. They just continually move the line in the sand just a little bit. Yeah, and you think, okay, this isn't a big deal, so you give a little bit on your morals and ethics, and you give a little bit, and you give a little bit, and then 10 years later, you look back and go, how did we get to where we are now?
Right.
And I saw it back in the early 2000s. The biggest thing I saw was, one, there was a person who was a male, and I knew they were a male. I'd known them for a number of years, and they had transitioned or was at least playing off that they were a female.
Right.
And they were at a school event to watch one of their kids. And he wanted to go in and use the female restroom. And I saw this and I stopped him. And I said, you can't go in there. You got to go in the other one. And put up a little bit of a fuss. And I said, well, you're either going to use the proper facility or I'm going to have to ask you to leave. And, of course, the school district and myself personally were threatened with lawsuits as a result because we were violating someone's rights to go into a facility they truly didn't have the right, in my opinion, to go into.
Well, and this was even before gender identity was added to the Civil Rights Code, right?
Yeah, the next thing was shortly after it came that we needed to change school board policy to align with what had just recently passed the legislature, which was putting gender identity and sexual orientation into the Iowa Code, Civil Rights Code. It took us 3 school board meetings and a couple of consultations with our school attorney to get the board to the point where we were almost forced into having to put that in code, even though we didn't see the need, nor did we want it in our school board policies, but they acquiesced, as every school district in the state did. And that's when I really started thinking I'm having to really compromise my own values to keep people out of the court system and keep them out of lawsuits. And it took me a few years, but then finally after the merger between Alton and Ray, a lot of hard work went into that. And I had a conversation with the board president a year after that that was going to be my last year. And he asked why. I said, you've gone through all the hard work. The next few years should be fairly easy. You can focus back on educational issues, things you really like to talk about. And I said, yeah, but Brad, I'm to the point where I can't compromise my moral and ethics stance anymore. I'm going to have to advise you on a number of topics that are going to come down in the next few years. And I just can't do that. And I refuse to do it. I think it's time that I step away.
Yeah, that's amazing. And was that in, did you say 2018?
2019 is when I stepped away. Yeah, but I saw it coming. The first real incident was early 2000s. So this isn't a new thing. A lot of people see it as all of a sudden it's front and center in the news. It's in their face that these are new issues, and they're not new issues. These have been brewing for decades.
Yeah, because we do have the misconception that it just started during COVID.
Right.
Because that's when we really started to see it exacerbated, especially with the funding, the federal funding and everything that went into those programs like CASEL and social emotional learning and CRT and DEI and all those things. So it's interesting to hear that it was going on. That's 20 plus years ago.
Yeah.
Incrementally, it's like the frog in the boiling water, right?
That's right.
You turn it up a little bit, and before you know it, you're boiling to death.
Great analogy.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'm looking for something on my website right now because I wrote an article about social emotional learning. And one of the things we had I had researched at that time was the direction of the Superintendent's Association. And they were talking about reimagining schools by 2025. Mm-hmm. And then they had all the social emotional learning and the LGBTQ plus IA, QZ, whatever stuff in there. And really this culturally relevant teaching and trauma-informed teaching and all those things. It was like they were really pushing in that direction to change our school system in that way.
Yeah.
What have you seen? I mean, now that you've seen both sides of that, and later I do want to talk about finance, educational finance, because you're the perfect person for that. But now that you've seen both sides of that and you're in the legislature, what has been a focus, being the chair of the education committee? What has been your focus in trying to solve some of those issues?
There's been legislation that we've gotten through that address some of the social issues, but what's really on my mind and heart is getting the Department of Education back to focus on what they were really intended to do originally, which was monitor student achievement and get best practice into the classroom, make sure our teachers are trained in that current best practice on how to educate. We've passed legislation in literacy, reading and writing, 2 years ago to that extent. Also math this past year. And we need to continue to focus on those strategies that work, because this is just from my own personal, and it's not every school district in the state. Everybody paints the same brush with every district in the state, but really too much focus on, in my thinking, on the social aspects. We're supposed to be focused on the curriculum and teaching kids how to read and write and do math and how to engage with science topics and scientific method and checking research and making sure it's valid and accurate and those kind of things. That's what we need to get back to.
Do you think there's a pathway back there?
We're working on that. Like I said, we passed legislation 2 years ago for science reading. So that focuses on literacy, reading, writing. This past year, science and mathematics, and current best practices in teaching math, moving away from what a lot of people see as the Common Core, and Iowa Core is connected to Common Core, and really getting back to those, what we know are current best research-supported practices in teaching those disciplines, and moving our student achievement forward. And we really have to spend less time focusing on these social issues, these leftist ideologies that have been going on, as I said, for decades, incrementally getting pushed into our classrooms, and focused on kids actually learning and not being indoctrinated.
We used to be number one in the U.S., didn't we, in education, or at least in the top 5, right?
Oh, for years we were held up. I was held up as a model for how to educate kids,
and you don't,
especially
really,
in rural states.
You don't really hear about those ratings that much anymore. How are we ranked now?
It depends on the ranking. Most would agree we're around 14th, 15th.
Yeah.
Some rankings have us even lower than that.
Yeah.
If you look at NAEP scores and those type of things, we're actually lower.
Well, and I was Representative Eddie Andrews was here, my last guest on the show, who's running for governor, and your colleague, and he talked about Common Core and talked about getting back to first in the nation. What is, and you'd probably be more prepared to answer this than most people. What is the challenge with Common Core, and what is Common Core? What's the background behind that?
Well, the background behind it is, it was developed at the federal level.
Okay.
And if you want me to go into Department of Education at the federal level, I certainly can.
Go for it.
It's largely unconstitutional in its existence. The current Department of Education at the federal level, in its form and function right now as a cabinet level position, came about during the Carter administration. So 1979, I think it actually went into effect in 80. There is nothing in the 10th Amendment of our U.S. Constitution that gives the federal government powers or rights in education.
I think your phone's...
It's not specifically listed there. So if it's not listed as a power of the federal government, then it's assumed it's a right of the state or the individual. And education isn't there. So it should be states or individuals that are driving... Excuse me.
Oh, you're fine.
That should be driving that.
So what are your thoughts on removing
I am
the Federal Department of Education?
I'm in full support of either phasing it out or ripping the Band-Aid off and just getting rid of it. There's always fear that there's going to be a loss of revenue. And it possibly could be. Prior to 1979, we were still getting federal nutrition dollars going into our hot lunch programs. We were still getting special ed dollars. I mean, those things aren't going to go away. They're just going to go back to divisions that probably do a better job overseeing those monies anyway. As a school superintendent, I can safely say that in any given year, about 7 to 8% of my total budget was federal dollars.
Okay, so it wasn't an overwhelming.
Right.
And a lot of those,
And a lot
did
of
they
that,
have ties?
and the biggest amounts were at the time in the federal nutrition dollars and special education.
Okay.
Yeah, and they are important. I'm not saying they're not, but I think people believe that our local public school districts are funded at a higher level from the federal government and what they really are.
It's mostly local, right?
Yeah.
Cities, or I mean, your state or your property taxes, your county.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And the state allotment.
Yeah, and the state allotment.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard people say that we've gotten so out of balance with administrators to teachers ratios in public schools. Is that true? What do you see about that?
I've seen data that would lead you to believe that.
Yeah.
And I think there are, especially some of our larger school districts that are top heavy, is how I'm going to put it. I think our smaller districts, and I would have to go back and look at the data specifically, but what stuck out in my mind was the smaller districts, they're trying to share upper level management, superintendents, business managers, even in some cases, curriculum directors, principals, those type of things, because there's incentives involved with that to become more efficient. I was a shared superintendent 11 of my 16 years, either between two school districts or holding a dual role of building principal and superintendent. So I know it can be done. Now in larger districts, it may not be possible, but you look at some of these different divisions that they have, they just keep bringing on administration to oversee it. And some of it could very well be driven by DEI and CRT and overseeing some of these social programs that have been pushed into our schools.
What is considered an administrator versus a educator in the system?
It's contractual.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
So it could be anything from a counselor to a DEI administrator to a principal to a secretary, or those are administrators.
Your secretaries would be under the administrative budget.
Right.
Yeah. Counselors, it depends on how the counselor is being utilized.
Right.
Curriculum directors would fall into that. Transportation supervisors, building principals.
Yeah, because I've seen some data where they've said, okay, we have more administrators than teachers across the board, which I know isn't true in smaller schools.
That's not necessarily true.
Yeah, but maybe in some of the bigger districts they have more administrators, not maybe than teachers. I don't know, but right, depending on how they categorize those.
When we put the teacher leadership program in place a number of years ago, that literally took some really good teachers out of the classroom and put them into instructional coach roles or some other teacher leader role. So contractually, they were probably still classified as teachers. Some of them would have been classified as administrators, but they were some of our better educators as well that were moved into those roles. And you could see 15 years ago that we were going to hit a wall where there was a demographic age that was going to retire, and we weren't replacing them on the backside fast enough. So we knew the teacher shortage was coming. We saw it a number of years ago. That shouldn't be a shock or a new thing to anyone either, although we act like it is. When they implemented the TLC program, Teacher Leader Program, that kind of accelerated the issue. So we're moving people out of the classroom to coach other teachers, which on the surface sounds like a good thing. I don't know that it was necessarily. And then we have to replace them. So you're going to replace them with young rookie teachers, and we don't have enough of them coming out even back at that time. So we created the hole ourselves, in my opinion. And we just recently took and passed legislation that school districts can use those teacher leadership dollars in other capacities. They don't have to participate in that program anymore, but they still get the dollars. So you're starting to see some school districts that are pulling back from those instructional coach models and some of the other curriculum models that were put into place.
And that seems important because if you have a budget and you can only spend this amount of dollars on this amount of things, sometimes you're going to try to spend all of it and keep perpetuating in something that may not be worth doing because you can't spend the money anywhere else.
And school districts in Iowa have a number of categorical funds, and they can only spend those dollars within that silo of the category. And I can't shift it from one to the other, or it's very difficult to shift from one to the other. So you are kind of forced into spending those categoricals down to protect your general fund. And we're working on legislation to make it easier to use funds that maybe aren't getting expended, how those can be moved with board action over into an area that they can put them into play in the classrooms.
How important were the ESAs, and how has that impacted Iowa?
We're in the first year of it really being fully phased in, so I can't say that we have the data to necessarily make any good value judgments. But we didn't see a lot of kids shift from across the state from public schools to private schools. So that funding, you're funded on a per pupil basis.
Right.
So if I didn't lose any pupils, I didn't lose any funding per se, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think what has people's nose out of joint is now another entity is also getting some funding. What we need to be looking at is, do we want an educated population? Do we want kids to be well educated who hopefully will stay in Iowa and live and work and raise families? And I don't really care, in my opinion, where they're being educated. I want them well educated so they can contribute back to our society and, be educated voters and fill our employment gaps that we need filled and stay right here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that freedom of choice is important. If a parent thinks that their child would be better educated somewhere else, I mean, it's important for them to have that option and opportunity.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
I would say in the next couple of years we'll have better data to see how many actually did migrate from public school to private school. I think you're going to be surprised at how little the shift occurred across the state. It may be more so in central Iowa or eastern Iowa where it's a little more populated and you have more choices. But other than extreme northwest Iowa, which is just outside of my district, Sioux County in that area, I don't think you're going to see much shifting of students.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, I don't think there'll be any mass exodus or anything like that. It'll just be, there'll be more opportunity and maybe a little more competition, which is always good.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So you had announced a run for Congress, right?
I announced an exploratory committee.
Exploratory committee,
Yep.
Exactly. Yep. And then, decided to return focus back to the Senate. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Sure. I was actually asked by a number of people if I would consider taking a look at the congressional seat when it opened up. Our current Congressman, Randy Feenstra, is taking a good hard look at running for governor.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's probably a 98% chance that he is going to run. That creates an open seat. It's the largest geographic congressional district. It's the most rural. It's 36 counties, so it's over a third of the state.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's the most conservative district in the state of Iowa, and I would argue it's one of the most conservative in the nation. So it's pretty important that we get someone in that seat that understands rural Iowa values, who is conservative, has a proven track record of success, and is somewhat well known throughout that district. I was apprehensive at first. I actually turned him down the first time. About the third time, I said, yeah, I'll take a look at it.
Okay.
And we hit 26 counties of the 36 in just over a month.
Yeah, you mentioned that at our meeting, and I thought, holy cow, you had to be on the road every day.
It was nearly every day, sometimes 2 or 3 stops. Put a lot of miles on the vehicle. Had some great conversations with people throughout the district. There was a couple deciding factors. One, was my own family situation. I have 2 grown adult children. They're starting families now. It's kind of nice that I can stay. They live here in Iowa, central Iowa, and I'm close enough that I can be grandpa and I can be dad and father-in-law and be active in their lives. My life, even though it's still really busy as a legislator, is to the point where I get to spend some really good quality time with my wife. She gets to come down to Des Moines with me during session. Some things that I really didn't want to give up. Also, the reality is that first term or two when you're out in the federal government, you're really working to make connections, to build credibility, to learn the system. It's starting all over again. I'm one that I don't think people should be lifetime legislators. That's not the way it was designed. So I had no intention of being in office for 15, 20 years. And I'm in a position at the state level that I think I am making a difference, that I do have a voice, that I have built up some credibility. I'm an assistant majority leader. I'm chair of the education committee, vice chair of 2 other committees. And I think I'm making a difference for the people back in my district back home. Do you really want to give that up and start all over again? And I decided that no, I didn't. When we were out talking with people throughout the congressional district, we would spend 15, 20 minutes talking about federal issues. And then the other 45 minutes to an hour, we talked about all the state level work that we'd been doing and things that I had been involved in. And it was questions coming from them on those issues. So, subliminally, I'm getting the message that people really wanted me to stay in my current seat. And I was actually hearing that from a few, that we support you going out to D.C., but we love the work you're doing down in Des Moines. We're afraid of who's going to replace you, and we would love to have you stay there.
We need to keep our good legislators.
Yeah.
Steve Holt was of the same mind, a similar mind, that he feels like he can do so much more work here. I mean, you don't get the fancy title or the big salary, but you definitely can make an bigger impact.
Right.
And I always tell people that, your circle of influence is the most important thing, growing that. And where better to do that than your city councils and your school boards and your, state legislature. I mean, we love to talk about the national politics and all the issues that are going on in the news, but we really have the biggest impact at home.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, your local governments have more an impact on your daily lives than what's going on in the federal government in most cases.
Yeah, well, thanks for staying here.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. I think the biggest part of our conversation this morning, it kind of surprised me. I mean, it didn't, because it's a big deal, but there were so many more things to talk about as well. But everybody wanted to really talk about eminent domain, private property rights, your role in championing those rights this last session. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. There were 12 of us in the Senate. Quite frankly, we were just tired of the stonewalling of eminent domain bills coming over from the House. The Commerce Committee, in their work, did take up one bill this year. And what we wanted as a small group was that bill to come clean to the floor, unamended, and an opportunity to vote on it publicly.
And what was the premise of the bill? What was it about?
It was, if I remember the number, it was House File 639, which put some parameters on expectations for insurance levels, making sure that if there was a breach or a problem, that the farmers were adequately covered. There were some issues about re-putting the soil back together properly.
And this is for...
It didn't block the project per se. It just put some parameters around it.
And to give folks some background, if they don't know, we're talking about the carbon capture.
Right.
Use of eminent domain for private enterprise.
Right. The IUC, the Iowa Utilities Commission, granted the use of eminent domain for the Summit Carbon Pipeline project, which I believe, and a number of others believe, that that was an unconstitutional decision. There's nothing in our U.S. Constitution or our state constitution that would allow for a private entity to take property or force eminent domain use of property on another private entity. It's public for public use
and public good.
And public, yeah. Well, they've put public good in there, but if you read in the Constitution, public good is not in the language.
It's just public use.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, roads, parks, electrical transmission lines, natural gas, the things that we see as truly public use would fall under eminent domain. And there's some measurements that they use in determining what public use is. So is it a commodity? Are we talking about this being a common carrier? Is it necessary? Is it convenient? Those are the things that they look at. And it's hard for this project, in my estimation, to meet those standards that have already been in current legal precedents. To me, it's a bigger issue than just this one project. And if you want to build a pipeline, go ahead and do it. I don't think you should be able to use eminent domain for the pipeline. There's concerns about safety and those type of things. I understand that. But this is in my opinion, a much bigger issue that could create a legal precedence moving forward that actually supports the Kelo versus New London decision, which a lot of people believe was an erroneous decision, where the city of New London enacted a taking and then gave the land over to a private entity to use eminent domain for a project. Anyway, back to the topic. It's a bigger issue. I don't think eminent domain should be used for this project. I don't think it should be used for any non-public use private entity to be able to use eminent domain on another private property owner. But every time we start talking about it, you saw it this morning.
Oh, yeah.
It always goes back to this one project.
Oh, sure.
And I'm more than happy to talk about that project, but it's bigger than this.
Right. And it's the concept, I guess. What was in your district, there was a pipeline that was projected to go through.
It runs east and west and north and south.
So it affected your constituents. And what types of things were you hearing from landowners?
They are many of the landowners that are vocal are of the same mind that I am, that eminent domain should not be used for this project. Some have legitimate fears, I think, of the safety of the pipeline because of breaches that have occurred in other areas of the U.S. I don't discount those. I try to stay focused on the eminent domain issue, per se. Right. But there's many that are supporters of the ethanol industry, and I think the ethanol industry is great. But they stand firm that we should be able to use eminent domain for these projects, and I can't agree with them. So, and I've a little bit of my background. I actually helped recruit an ethanol plant into my district.
Sure.
Prior to me being in the legislature, it does have a positive effect on corn prices. It's one more market for your grain, which are good things. Some of the byproducts of it, the DDGs, can be used for cattle feed. There were already some that were capturing carbon dioxide on their own, using it to produce dry ice. So there's a number of positives with the ethanol industry. But I just can't support the use of eminent domain for these kind of projects.
How's the project funded?
Tax credits from the federal government, largely, 45Q and others. And that's another issue, in my opinion. If you're building your business model solely around capturing the tax credits, it should be for a limited amount of time, and there's no sunset necessarily on these right now.
Wasn't it like $1.9 billion a year or something like that?
Right. Right.
And then some people had had the idea that in the big beautiful bill that it was removed with some of the other Green New Deal type stuff, but it wasn't.
There were discussions about removing that with some of the other,
right,
and it did not get removed.
Right,
is my understanding.
Right. Yeah, I looked at that, and I think the current projects across the board were still fully able to take advantage of that money, and then maybe they graduated it with newer projects or something like that.
Correct.
It was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So, and the House had submitted several pieces of legislation that the Senate had never taken up. And then this session, the Dauntless Dozen is what you were called, right?
Yeah, we were tagged up by former Congressman Steve King.
So you had explained that to us. How was it that you and the other, 10 or 11 legislators, senators were able to, force the bill to the floor and actually have a debate on it?
Yeah, we wanted the bill that I mentioned to the floor, clean as it came over from the House, and as was presented in the Commerce Committee. We didn't expect or even demand that it pass. We just wanted to be able to take a public vote on it, or we weren't going to vote on the budget. And we were going to hold out on that budget vote, final budget vote, until we got that bill to the floor. We did get it to the floor. It passed, but was vetoed by the governor. I have a lot of respect for Governor Reynolds. I've worked closely with her on a number of her legislative issues the last 3 years. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I won't work with her again, because I absolutely would.
Right.
If it's something I agree with and have a passion for, I'd more than happily work with her and advance her legislation. We just differ on this issue. And I disagree with the veto. But what we're going to have to do, since we're not coming into special session, we're just going to have to take it up next year and see if we can't come to, if not common ground, at least some legislation that we can move forward to protect the landowners and their property rights.
Sure. And I think that dialogue's so important. At our last meeting, we had Senator Kevin Alonz and Senator Jesse Green, and we were able to have a civil dialogue. Jesse didn't vote for the legislation. Senator Alonz stood firm on it and voted for it. And it was interesting. Over the last 2 meetings, I've learned so much about, the carbon pipeline and eminent domain and private property rights. And it's, but like you said, you have to be able to disagree on one issue and still work together on the other issues.
Absolutely.
Because there's so much to get accomplished. And we saw that, Senator Sinclair and you both worked to get the DEI bill through subcommittee, committee, onto the debate floor and get that passed. And that was a big deal. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So the House set up a higher education committee this past year, and I was able to work between chambers with Representative Collins, who was chair of that higher ed committee.
We just had him on.
Yeah, great young man, great guy.
Super sharp.
You bet. And some of their passion coming out of that was tackling DEI issues at our higher institutions, higher education institutions, particularly our regent universities. And we worked pretty hard to get that across. Now there's some controversy that it's, being uncovered, although we kind of knew it was happening, that they're doing a shell game where they're just renaming departments and programs. So we're going to have to probably, in my mind, address that. I know the governor's come out and spoken very harshly against it.
Yeah, they just don't want to give it up.
Yeah.
It's like
it's so ingrained in their ideology.
Yeah.
I truly believe that they think they're doing good work.
Sure.
And they don't understand that it's really, truly a form of reverse discrimination. I'm all for giving people a leg up if they truly need assistance or if they're if they need help in getting into that higher education. Great, but not at the expense of others. We should, if you apply to a college or university in a college of study, you should be measured on your merits.
Yeah,
not on your melanin content
no,
or your religious
sexual
beliefs or
orientation
sexual
or
orientation,
anything like
right.
that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they should almost not even know anything about the person's background. Here's our skills. Here's our test scores. Here's the committees we served on and the organizations we volunteered for and the
Right.
you know our it's like it should be really a blind.
Yep.
This is the merit. It shouldn't matter. And Martin Luther King talked about this, but the content of your character,
Absolutely.
not the color of your skin, not your whatever else, those shouldn't be the determining factors. We should have equal access, and that means you have the opportunity to apply just like everybody else, and you have the same standards as everybody else for admittance.
Right. And there was an expectation coming out of legislation that our board of regents develop policies and procedures and have them in place to start this current school year. They've really moved pretty slow on that, slower than what I'm comfortable with. I understand the whole taking feedback and listening to a broad range of voices before you make some of those decisions. I was in that seat at one time as well, not necessarily on the regents, but at a local school district, K-12 level.
Well, it affects them
and
too as well.
And it's important to listen to everyone affected, but at some point you got to cut bait and draft that policy and get it in place, and procedures that go along with it. So I'm disappointed in the movement of our board of regents during this interim, and that they haven't taken it up a little more aggressively.
How will you handle, the shell game when they're just changing the name of the officers or changing the name of the programs and still trying to push those? How will that be handled, do you think?
Well, first of all, you have to have some proof.
Yeah.
Just don't go on hearsay.
Right.
Or one person's opinion.
Right.
But if you do have that proof and we can and show that it's really going on, outside of one interview that was released here just recently, my opinion is you got to hit them in the pocketbooks, because we do fund our regent universities with taxpayer dollars.
Right.
It's not all tuition. So if we have to make that threat that you're going to get cut your funding unless you do this.
Right.
I don't like to go there necessarily, but maybe that's the tool we had, the lever we had.
And that's kind of the essence of the bill too, is we're not going to fund those programs.
Correct.
The state taxpayer funded.
The dollars that were going to those programs need to go into other places that affect the classroom and improve education at our regent universities, not into DEI initiatives. But maybe we just need to take that funding away.
Right. Well, I think most people would agree with you.
Yeah.
We need to be going back to the basics. We don't need to be funding divisive contact or concepts and ideologies.
Right.
Yeah, in our universities. What are your thoughts about alternate teacher licensure? I mean, with the shortage of teachers that we have right now, maybe somebody's a professional or they have a degree in history or a degree in something else, but they don't necessarily have a teaching degree, but they have either a high knowledge in business or whatever industry, or a high education, but not necessarily from the School of Education. And would you support an alternate licensure?
And actually we have created and passed legislation in the last 2 years that I've worked on very hard that create alternate pathways for teacher licensure. So exactly what you're saying, if you have high level expertise in banking, worked in the banking industry forever, and you want to get out of that, you have a passion for teaching, and you could go in and maybe you can teach mathematics or some other related course. But how do I get my teaching license? Well, there's now ways, actually multiple ways that you can do that without leaving your current full-time job. You can do it in online, webinar content, hybrid courses, and get credit for your years of experience in another field. We've done it with our CTE courses, the home economics and shop and ag for a couple years now, so we know it's a model that can work. We've also made it easier if you have a teaching license and you're in another state, that we recognize that license in Iowa and the fewer hoops to jump through. What we do see is a number of kids on the border areas of our state. So where I live in particular, we have another number of students that go to University of South Dakota or South Dakota State for their education. What they really want to do is come back to Iowa and teach, but they have to get their South Dakota license before they come back to get their Iowa license, which would be an example. Well, now Iowa just recognizes that South Dakota license, and you have fewer hoops to jump through to come back in and teach in the state. So we've done a few things.
Yeah, I'd love to see
it's
that
work we
open
need
up.
It's work we need to continue.
Yeah, we always need more good teachers, and there aren't always a lot coming out. And, teacher pay is a thing. How can we improve that, and not only improve that, but reward merit-based, progress. I mean, I don't know if we have that in our education system or not, but.
No, not currently.
Not currently.
No.
Yeah.
Most school districts, although we did with Chapter 20 and the rewriting of that, and that was a number of years ago. It was a great piece of legislation, in my opinion. There were some school districts that just threw out that salary schedule and did put in some merit-based type practices.
Yeah.
At the local level.
Okay.
Which is probably the best place for those decisions to occur anyway.
Yeah.
But there's still a vast number of schools that kept that old salary schedule. So if you live one more year and sign one more contract, you're going to get not only a raise, but you're protected from losing your position.
So you're on the you're the vice chair of is it the conservation?
I'm vice chair of government oversight, vice chair of ethics.
Of ethics.
Yeah, okay. I sit on natural resources.
Natural resources, yeah. Okay, because we talked about, after the meeting, we talked a little bit about water quality and some of the issues we've had in the state. Yep. And at the beginning of the meeting, you kind of talked about your dad's background. And tell us about that. Yeah. And let's talk about water quality in Iowa, because I think we're suffering right now.
So my dad was a well driller by trade.
Okay.
He actually worked for Thorpewell Corporation right out of high school, learned how to run the drill rigs and all that, put in a number of city wells around the state, but was eventually hired on by the United States Geological Survey, which was out of the University of Iowa at that point in time, to map groundwater in the state of Iowa. So when you look at groundwater maps that were produced in the early 70s to early 80s, that was a lot of his work around the state, putting in test wells, core samples, doing water flow testing and those type of things. And they still use a number of his test wells today. So a kid growing up, I had these maps, these groundwater maps all over my dad's home office basement, and core samples that he was boxing up and sending off, and data that he was reporting. When he was doing the eastern half of the state, we actually lived near Iowa City in West Branch, and he worked in Iowa City. But when he did the western half of the state, we moved to the western part of the state, which is how we ended up in Aurelia. And he had a warehouse and his home office right there. So it's an issue. I was very excited to be on the Natural Resources Committee because I grew up around a lot of these water quality issues, even back before they were a real hot topic. It's something that I'm really interested in diving into. How can
we as a state solve some of those issues? I know one of our members was talking about the issue with Des Moines water, taking water from the river, having shallow wells, etc., being a part of the problem. What is the problem? Why do we have such high nitrates and nitrites? And we were told we couldn't water our lawns and we had to ration because of the nitrates. I'm running for county supervisor.
Yep.
And so I've attended some of the meetings. I'm trying to keep track of what's going on. And there was somebody from our water conservation board that was there speaking about the levels of nitrites and how important that was, that we more closely monitor those. What can we do as a state to fix that?
Well, I think we have to do. We have to really look into the research about what's naturally occurring, nitrates and nitrites, and what is actually being affected by what we're putting on the land. They always point to the ag community,
right?
And actually there was a lawsuit a number of years ago that they were going upstream the Raccoon River up into northwest Iowa and trying to blame farmers for applications running downstream. Well, they found that to be largely not true necessarily.
Okay.
You look at the number of chemicals that you put on your own home lawn.
Right.
Maybe you not, but some people.
Well, I think most people do.
Yeah.
I mean, if we had a lady down the street that didn't, and she would section off her yard and be pulling weeds, and her lawn, I mean, lots of weeds, lots of whatever. But I don't think you could walk down the street and find a lawn that's not treated.
Yeah. So we tend to turn our head on that application.
Exactly. Yeah.
And depth of your well is going to have an effect, because the way our aquifers, the way the ground when the water permeates down through, it's like a charcoal filter.
Sure.
In your own home. It does filter out some of those agents. But personally, I think we need a little deeper research on what is occurring and why. And hopefully it's not biased research, that supports one community or another. But if you are drawing from a shallow well that is near a groundwater surface, there's a very good chance, and this is just common sense, that your water is going to be more contaminated than if it's coming from a sandstone aquifer that is hundreds of feet down.
And so that's what we're doing, is drawing from a shallow well near running water or
surface
in Des Moines.
water.
Yeah. Yeah. So would you, is that something the state could do then, is say, hey, we're going to set up a committee and make sure we do this research?
Well, we have
for the state of Iowa.
We have a great research facility not too far from here.
Right.
Iowa State University, I would think, would be equipped to take on some of that. We have other region universities that we're paying tax dollars for that could jump in and assist as well. They probably already are doing some of that work. We just need to encourage them to do a little deeper, harder look at it. And again, try to stay away from bias. Yeah. Because that's always difficult when someone's funding your projects.
I know.
To be somewhat biased in the outcome.
That's kind of the thing you do now, is when you see a study, you go look and see who funded it.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can get some funding that's not looking for a biased outcome for their products and services.
Right. And it goes back to, concerns about cancer rates in the state of Iowa.
Yeah.
I think it all feeds into a similar discussion. We're one of a few states that their rates are actually growing. My daughter's a cancer survivor, childhood cancer survivor. She went through treatment 3 times. She was diagnosed when she was 3 years old and finally had a bone marrow transplant at age 11.
Wow.
Greatly affected her childhood and growing up.
Sure.
My mother's a 2-time breast cancer survivor.
How old's your daughter now?
My daughter, thank you for asking. That's not a safe question to ask my father.
You know what? I've done that.
She was born in 87, so...
Okay.
Whatever that
do
is.
The math.
Yeah, do the math. Yeah. Okay. Both my kids were born the same year. The Minnesota Twins won the World Series.
Okay.
So I'm going to make a prediction right now. The Minnesota Twins will never again win a World Series because I'm not having any more children.
You might have to adopt so they can win.
That's right. And she's a nurse, lives in Altoona.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And that was her goal. She wanted to give back to the community that helped save her life. And anyway, it's an issue that is very close to my heart, and having high cancer rates in certain pockets around the state isn't a new thing either. I mean, a lot of these issues aren't new issues, and I keep saying that in this interview.
Yeah.
But they're just now coming to fruition. I don't know if it's the prevalence of 24/7 news media,
Sure.
or that these higher controversial pieces of discussion sell more ads and gain more clicks. I'm not sure, but these aren't new issues. But we have put additional funding into cancer research this year. The governor made it one of her priorities. Whether it's enough or not, I don't know, but it is becoming an issue that we need to look at it. And it has to do with what's in our groundwater, what's in our environment, what's our diet, and how's our diet changed, processed foods and all of that. I've kind of recently started learning about regenerative ag practices.
Okay.
And I'm no expert on it, so don't quiz me too much, but the use of cover crops and lower no-till and reducing the amount of chemicals that are put on for farming practices, doing weed management through other practices besides chemical application. Is something that's really become interesting to me.
I'd like to learn more about that too, and I think as a state we could learn more about that.
Howard Vlieger
is
a name you can take down. He lives just outside of Sioux Center.
Howard Vlieger.
Yeah, Vliger. And he is a wealth of information. He has done numerous studies on this, actually practices it himself, and he can show you his own personal data.
There's another guy you'd be surprised that's become kind of an expert in that is Pat Miletich. He's like 7-time UFC champion from Bettendorf, Iowa.
Really?
Yeah, he's that was back in the early days of the sport, but I had talked to him at length about it, about regenerative farming. And sometime I want to have him on the podcast, but I'll talk to this Howard Vlieger too, because I know it's a really important issue. I knocked a lot of doors last session when I was running for Iowa House, and number one was property taxes, but I would say 2 or 3, water quality. People would bring that up, our water quality.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we're ranked very high in the nation. I think maybe we should start making more bourbon from those.
There we go.
We could be the Kentucky of Kentucky Iowa bourbon.
There we go.
We've got the resources, as our friend Rob Taylor's shown us.
Yes.
With Revelton.
Yeah.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time, and we're getting close to the hour mark here. How can people reach you? What's the best way to support you in your campaign?
Yep, I'm up for re-election in 26.
Okay.
And I intend to run. And so if people want to learn more about either my race, learn more about me, or get in contact, they can go to LynnEvansForIowa.com. There's a website there where if you want to contribute or learn about me personally or learn about my race, things I've done while I'm in the legislature, that's a good spot. Also, you can reach out to me via email at evansforiowa, and that's FOR, not the number 4, evansforiowa@gmail.com. And I'm always very interested to what people have and willing to answer questions and to hear from constituents.
Well, thank you so much for everything you do. And one thing about Lynn is he's very accessible. You were so great to work with this last session.
Oh, thank you.
It's nice when you can pick up the phone and call a representative or a senator, and they actually care and they want to talk about the issues. And you've proven yourself to be that type of legislator. So I wish you nothing but the best of luck this next session.
Great.
So
thank you.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get to work together a little bit.
Well, I'm sure we will.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming out this morning. Yeah. I mean, I know the drive isn't a short one, and I appreciate you coming out, and we'd love to have you. During the session, we have our meetings closer to downtown, and early in the morning, enough that hopefully we can have you back.
Good.
Yeah.
I would love it.
All right. Well, God bless you.
Yeah. Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
Mm-hmm. Bye.